Silver stacking, the future economy and how to survive it. I believe the world has changed forever. Since the initial outbreak, this virus known as SARS-CoV-2 has spread to most countries around the world. We really need to be mindful that there currently isn't a vaccine, nor is there a cure. The only thing we have to combat this are vaccines that will create antibodies to help the body fight the virus and reduce the symptoms. This virus is basically a type of flu and will continue to reappear in some form regardless of whether a vaccine is found or not. This is why we get flu shots every year. The CDC and other labs take their best guess at what the next strain of flu will be and create a vaccine for it to inoculate the world just prior to the traditional flu season. Newsflash, the flu isn't going away. It will continue year after year as it has for millennia, and although I'm certainly no immunologist, my logic tells me that the flu mutations will probably only continue to get more severe and more impactful to humans in the coming years. Perhaps medical technology will advance to a point where viruses can completely be eradicated. We can only hope. But until then, I think we need to face the fact that this is the new world we now live in. A world where social distancing may become culturalized and a part of normal everyday life. I can see a world where people meet without shaking hands. I can see restaurant businesses being only a fraction of what they currently are, and the same with any other businesses that involve the congregation of people in a close proximity to each other. I can see basically a world where brick and mortar stores are a thing of the past. Online shopping and delivery services may be the way of the future. In order to facilitate this type of economy, physical currencies will become completely obsolete. We won't be physically handing cash to each other anymore. The USD is already 96% digital, with only 4% representing actual physical paper currency or coinage. How often do you think a typical American actually transacts in physical cash for goods and services nowadays? Let me know in the comment section below. As I have covered on this channel many times before, the US dollar is in serious trouble and on the verge of a complete reset or even collapse. The only way to prevent this would be to revalue the currency, reset the currency with a tangible asset backing like a precious metal, or replacing the currency altogether. The US national debt is an astonishing $25 trillion. That equates to over $200,000 of debt per taxpayer. No amount of tax hikes can cover this spread anymore. The nation has printed money beyond the point of any possibility of recovery. Many say that the dollar will never die because America has the mightiest economy in the world, and that would be true, but it doesn't erase the fact that the nation's current gross domestic product, what America produces to sell, is currently at negative 118%. Let that sink in for a moment. The federal debt is 118% more than what it can produce and sell to generate income to pay that debt. And every stimulus dollar that is digitally printed and delivered only widens this gap. The reality is that the dollar can no longer survive from this blatant printing abuse, and I feel at this point it's not even intended to. Once the Fed's quantitative easing experiment decision was made in 2009 as a method of economic recovery, it only prolonged the inevitable demise of the world reserve currency. It seems now that America is just trying to get what they can while they still hold the world's reserve currency status. Spend, spend, and spend some more. The realizations are that it will never be paid back, so why not keep it going as long as possible? Fill as many pockets as possible. Build as much infrastructure as possible. Do as much defense spending as possible. Give American citizens as much cash as they need to keep kicking the can down the road, to keep taking advantage of the fact that America has the ability to create as much currency out of thin air as they wish. Billions and trillions of dollars at a time. When it was realized that the dollar will inevitably lose its global confidence and the ability to create infinite quantities of money will soon come to an end, why not spend all that you can while you can? America will have to default on its loans, but so will the rest of the world. The Fed's irresponsible management of the U.S. economy and dollar will result in the decimation of the entire world's economy. 60% of the world's economy is directly affected by the US dollar. This is why world nations are now scrambling to find anything other than the US dollar to back their national currencies. The world can see that the demise of the dollar is inevitable, but many Americans just can't seem to wrap their heads around the acceptance of this idea. The first US dollar, as it is known today, was printed in 1914 upon the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank. Less than 6 decades later, the dollar officially became the world's reserve currency. As it did in World War I, the United States entered into World War II well after the fighting had started. Before it entered the war, the United States served as the Allies' main proprietor of weapons, supplies, and other goods, collecting much of its payments in gold. By the end of the war, the United States owned the vast majority of the world's gold. This precluded a return to the gold standard by all of the countries that had depleted their gold reserves. In 1944, delegates from 44 Allied countries met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to come up with a system to manage a foreign exchange system that would not put any country at a disadvantage. It was decided that the world's currencies couldn't be linked to gold, but they could be linked to the US dollar, which was linked to gold. Instead of gold reserves, other countries accumulated reserves of US dollars. Needing a place to store their dollars, countries began buying U.S. Treasury securities, which they considered to be a safe store of money. The reserve status is based largely on the size and strength of the U.S. economy and the dominance of the U.S. financial markets. Despite large deficit spending, trillions of dollars in foreign debt, and the unbridled printing of U.S. dollars, U.S. Treasury securities remain the safest store of money. The trust and confidence that the world has in the ability of the United States to pay its debts has kept the dollar as the most redeemable currency for facilitating world commerce. The gold standard ended in 1972, but the dollar's reserve status remained. According to the International Monetary Fund, today more than 61% of all foreign bank reserves are denominated in US dollars, and nearly 40% of the world's debt is in dollars. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, more than half of the US dollars printed are outside of the United States, as much as 65% to the tune of $580 billion. According to the World Bank, more than 65 countries peg their currencies to the US dollar, while 5 US territories and 7 sovereign countries use it as their official currency of exchange. The very obvious future demise of the US dollar is going to have a massive impact on the world. So the question I ask myself, where do I want my wealth to be before the dollar fails and it's too late to do something about it? For me, the answer involves 4 different asset classes. 1. Cash. First, substantial holdings of cash outside of the financial institutions for the very early stages of the crisis. We just don't know if the dollar will be revalued, reset, or replaced in a drastic, quick manner or over a reasonable time period. Either way, once it does happen, you will want to have complete access to your liquid wealth to react to whichever situation occurs. You can be sure that the banks will declare a bank holiday and stop all methods of withdrawal in order to remain solvent. So, for me, now is the time to remove my excess cash from the banks and any other investment classes that are denominated in a fiat currency. 2. Precious metals. Precious metals offer a safe haven to place your wealth to wait out the economic storm. Precious metals are not denominated in any fiat currency and retain their own intrinsic value based on historical demand. It is important to understand that this safe haven aspect can only be achieved if you have physical possession of those precious metals. Owning paper precious metals such as exchange-traded funds, aka exchange-traded products, derivatives, unallocated bullion programs, mining shares, future options, or any other vehicle that does not involve the physical possession of the metal itself is not a true safe haven and has tremendous risk. 3. Owning real estate. I'm not referring to rental properties. I'm referring to owning the home which you personally reside in, or owning land that can reap some valuable resource such as fresh water, lumber, ranching, farming, wild game, etc. During a severe economic crisis, people won't have the ability to pay rent for either personal properties or business properties. Stimulus checks for businesses are primarily to pay salaries, with little left over to pay the landlords. Most landlords are deferring their rent payments as a show of goodwill, but will expect and need those payments eventually to make up their back mortgage and tax payments. If those businesses who owe rent fail to pay and end up filing bankruptcy, then as a landlord you're stuck with those liability back payments. Real estate is a financial liability unless it is your primary residence or resource producing where those harvested resources exceeds the value of your mortgage and tax liabilities. It is critical to your economic survival plan to ensure you have the necessary wealth accumulated and set aside to make mortgage and tax payments throughout a crisis to prevent the repossession of your property. And finally, 4. Cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not denominated in any fiat currency. It has its own intrinsic value as an accepted form of digital wealth, and it is very quickly achieving mass adoption. Institutional investors are getting laws passed to pave the way for their investors to be able to buy into cryptos. There are thousands of cryptocurrencies, but there's only one that is presently achieving the levels of adoption that I believe could withstand an economic crisis right now, and that is Bitcoin. I do hold altcoins as well, but when you look at the total cryptocurrency market cap of $256 billion, Bitcoin dominates this market currently with 67% of that value. Also be aware that most institutional purchases are not made directly in the markets and thus do not show up in these statistics. So there is actually a greater volume of Bitcoin than displayed here. Bitcoin is a digital asset much like our current fiat currency. However, it is not subject to inflation as there is a finite number that will ever exist, 21 million. No government or any other entity can ever create more. It is beyond the Fed's ability to manipulate and thus unable to be corrupted in the same ways that the US dollar has been abused and corrupted since its inception in 1913. When I look at the viable possibilities for what can replace the world reserve currency in the short term, I don't see any other national currency able to achieve such a status. Even if the Chinese yuan were backed by gold, it wouldn't be sufficient to support the world's economy. There is the International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights, or SDRs, But remember that the SDRs are also backed by nothing but the confidence in the IMF and the World Bank, which is an extension of the central banking system, which is what got us into all of this mess to begin with. I'm convinced that we will never go back to a physical currency. Whatever the future holds for money, I think it'll be most definitely in a digitized form, and nothing currently exists that is more secure or decentralized right now than Bitcoin. Once a mass adoption takes place, the digital currency will naturally stabilize and become less volatile. Bitcoin may only be a stepping stone to a much better form of digital currency in the future, but right now nothing is more valuable, accepted, and liquid as Bitcoin. I do want to make one point very clear. My financial assets are a diversification and not a replacement for one another. They are not the only asset classes to endure a financial crisis, but they are the ones I chose. I believe that in order to get through this global monetary crisis that is to come, it will take all four of these assets: cash, precious metals, real estate, and cryptocurrencies. Depending on the country you live in will determine what type of cash you should have. Your personal preference will decide which of the precious metals you may wish to stack. Real estate options are really opportunity-based, and what cryptocurrencies you choose to invest in would be a personal choice. Each of these asset classes provides a different and complementary strength to my overall wealth portfolio. Where is your wealth currently? Is any of it in an asset that is denominated by a fiat currency? Are you invested in any other non-fiat denominated asset classes other than the ones I identified? Let me know in the comments section below. A big thank you to all who support this channel, especially to those who take the time to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It is greatly appreciated. If you are not yet a subscriber and you enjoy this type of content, hit the subscribe button. Then be sure to select the notification bell to be notified as soon as I post up new content. If you're looking for a place to learn about precious metal stacking, the economy, and finance, stop by the ST66 Discord channel. The link will be in the Show More section below. This is a place for new stackers and veterans alike to discuss current events, precious metals and stacking topics, and so much more. You can choose to just read articles and monitor other people's conversations, or chime in and be a part of them. It's completely free and all are welcome. I'll look forward to seeing you there.